We've all been transported to worlds beyond our wildest imagination with books. But books are also a great vehicle to get together and exchange ideas. Welcome to Books du Jour. Come and join our authors at the table. Well, welcome back to Books du Jour. We have a brand new panel of guests and also new books. My first guest is Alice Eve Cohen, who wrote The Year My Mother Came Back. We have Amy Sohn, the actress, very powerful title. We will come back to that. And In Praise of Wonderland by Stacey D'Erasmo. No relation to Erasmus, In Praise of Folly?
Unfortunately, no.
Why unfortunately?
Because I think we were just peasants, so I don't think Erasmus was
Right, you
kind
probably
of in
started
that.
there
I should
too.
claim it, yeah.
But let's start with your book.
Great.
Why did you feel the need to, after the very heart-wrenching first book, to have to do a sequel?
Well, I wouldn't call it a sequel per se. It is about my family.
That's
It's
right.
a family story, and it takes place during a very eventful year. I started out thinking I just needed to write about this year, find the humor and the meaning in a chaotic and scary time. The book changed as I started writing it. It wasn't until my third time through that I realized it was a book about rediscovering my relationship with my mother, who had died 3 decades earlier. I thought I was really on the way to finishing the book, and I showed it to a trusted friend. At the time, the book was called My Left Eye, and there was an important section of the book that was about a terrifying event I had that having to do with my left eye. And she read it, and she said, "Oh, I'm sure you know this already, Alice, but the book is not about your left eye. The book is about your mother." And I was flabbergasted. I had no idea. And so, as it turned out, I lopped off the entire section that was about my left eye, which was half the book at the time, and allowed my mother to enter the book and realized that she was there on every page. And it was quite a process of discovery.
The process of discovery, which one was becoming a mother again, or becoming a daughter again, or both?
Well, I was a mother, and the year was a terribly challenging year as a mother. My youngest daughter was about to embark on a very difficult, complex, long medical procedure. My older daughter was about to go to college, and at the last moment, a week before college, decided she wanted to find her birth mother. Right on the cusp of my younger daughter having this difficult operation, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, which brought back a flood of memories about my mother, who had also had breast cancer when I was 12 years old. And we had a complicated relationship, and I had tried very hard to stop thinking about her after her death. And so I raised my children without any maternal influence, and here I was in this very, very difficult journey, and I realized I needed her and wanted her. And so I allowed my fantasies to flourish. It was a fulfilling experience, a little scary to kind of re-enter some difficult terrain that I had remembered and imagined with my mother, but ultimately quite fulfilling.
Amy, you're talking about discovery in a journey. Your actress, Maddie, seems to be also on a trip, and then the male character as well. It seems both of them seems to be on the journey to discovery. Yeah, is that what prompted the writing of the book, or it was more about writing about Hollywood?
I began to play with the idea of kind of updating a gothic tale of a woman who, thinks she's entering paradise, and then slowly discovers that she's married someone who's not who she thought he was, with the backdrop of everything we hear about in modern Hollywood.
Are we talking Frankenstein, Mary Shelley, discovering you're married to a monster?
The biggest novelistic influence on this was probably Rebecca.
Rebecca, yeah.
And then I watched, of course, pretty good film adaptation of Rebecca, I gotta say, when you have Hitchcock adapting you. It's
Sure.
like everyone's dream. I guess I liked the idea of the kind of hubris of a woman in her mid-20s that says, everyone's telling me this guy is not a good choice for me, but I'm not going to listen to anyone else because I'm 26. Because I was like that when I was 26. A lot of what goes on in this book is about the generation gap between someone who's on sort of the younger side of the baby boomer generation, and then I guess you'd call her like an old millennial. And I was a child actress, So I drew upon some of those experiences, and I was on the kind of audition circuit in New York for a bunch of years in my 20s. The great thing about writing about an actress is that, you know, I wanted to make her a much more talented performer than I ever was. And so I got out some of my subconscious desire to still be on the stage through the character of Maddie.
The word actress, I often mean actresses, but they say, I'm an actor.
Yeah.
Is it, there was a statement being made as to affirm yourself?
I did think about, you know, his character, Stephen Weller, the man she marries, who's this very sexy, wealthy, handsome movie star. You know, he certainly does a fair amount of acting in the novel, but it's really her story. And it's about the roles that we play in marriage, even on a much smaller scale, even in ordinary marriages, the way that we project various things onto the people who we love, they project onto us. The power is constantly shifting in relationships, and so I wanted to play around with the idea of, you know, what is it like for a young woman to be sort of fetishized for her beauty and her talent, and then come to wonder whether he loves her inside, and whether, you know, he truly respects her intellectually and that kind of thing. I was also very influenced by The Portrait of a Lady, and one thing that I love about that novel is that the heroine, Isabel Archer, she really gets herself into a bit of a mess. I mean, there's various people orbiting around her that make her life difficult, but she's incredibly headstrong, and she kind of ignores good counsel at a couple of moments. I'm always intrigued by characters that kind of make their own mess and then have to figure out how to clean it up. But, you know, it's very easy to point fingers when things go wrong in your life, but at a certain point, you know, you look at your own agency. And I think that too is where the actress metaphor sort of comes in.
Your Anna is having sort of life crisis, and she wants to come back as a rock star. That was an interesting choice.
The main character is named Anna, and she has been kind of an indie star, right? An indie rock star, but she's been off the scene for 7 years, and now she's embarking on this comeback tour of Europe. I had seen a number of women, especially in music, who actually did come back. I mean, Patti Smith would be sort of the biggest example
But she was
of
big
that.
in the 70s.
She was huge.
Yes.
I mean, she was massive, and at the height of her fame, basically, she walked away. The moment of going up is fantastic and interesting, and, you know, it's great. But what does it feel like to have been gone and now re-emerge years later? And that was what fascinated me.
What's your connection with that? Do you
You
feel
know,
like
I don't
it's
have-
your own life? You feel like you have to,
No.
it's a cyclic.
No, actually,
No.
it's just
You're
it's just
laughing.
an image right now. No, it's just an image that is really fascinating to me, and I think that also we often have the cliche that every comeback is just going to be a failure, right? A series of humiliations, a disaster,
It can happen.
something awful. Yeah, sure, and that happens. But there are actually quite a few people who do come back, and they're not the same, right? They're not doing an imitation of their younger selves, but they actually re-enter the stream of art, and interesting things happen.
Did you enjoy going on tour with the band? Was it
Yeah.
Scissor Sisters?
Yeah, Scissor Sisters.
Sister
Yeah.
Sisters.
I toured with them in 2010 to get an idea of what it's actually like to be on a tour. Yeah, sort of day after day, city after city,
Not fun.
set after set. It's different than what one might expect. A lot of downtime, a lot of hanging around, a lot of time when nothing is happening, and then all of a sudden a lot is happening, right?
It's just like a movie set.
It's
That's
just,
right,
it's just
yeah.
like a movie set. I mean, endless, you know, we were on buses and planes and in cars and going to all these different cities, which was fantastic. You know, we tend to see the high points, the sort of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, the big,
The glitter.
you know, the glitter, the glamour, but that's only a teeny part of what that life is really like, and that's what I needed to experience. And Scissor Sisters were great. It was really fun, and people would be hanging around backstage and stuff, and they would say like, "Well, who are you?" And I said, "I'm the novelist." Like, as if every rock band travels with its own novelist, just following them around.
Fragmentation of personality seems a pretty important theme to in your book. To be, you're the writer, you're the sister, you're the wife, and do you feel like we are all sort of dislocated inside ourselves?
Not dislocated so much, but the book is written in fragments. It's these different fragments, and what I was interested in is the fact that all of us are in many different time zones and many different modes all the time. At any given moment, we're thinking about, our pets, Sophocles, the train, a scrap of music that we heard on the way here, and that layering is what was really, really interesting to me. It wasn't the splitting maybe as much as the multiplicity of any person at any given time. And for performers, it's so fascinating because they are multiple kind of inherently, and I find that really, really interesting.
Is that something you will agree with, Alice? The fragmentation? Do you find yourself like the mother, you're also a playwright, forgot to mention that, you're the author.
In this memoir, I am very much playing with the idea of being a mother, and being a daughter, and having concentric circles of stories happening simultaneously. So there's the kind of close-up focus on this is a year, these are the events of my current family that take place right now in this year. And at the same time, all of us are always remembering the many layers of experience over a lifetime. In a moment, I can be experiencing a conversation with my young daughter, and at the same time, being my daughter's age with my mother, and re-experiencing all the complexity of being a daughter, and allowing that to inform my relationship with my daughter, and also re-experiencing and revisiting my parents' complex marriage, and then bringing that into my own understanding of my role as wife.
Do you find that sometimes holding on to the past can become a problem, a deterrent to being here and fully experience being with someone?
I had to reconnect to the past because I had closed that door. I had decided those memories of my mother, who died very suddenly and before we had resolved any of our serious difficulties, it was important for me to allow the memories of the past to return so that they would inform my present. I do feel a greater sense of resolution and that I've made peace with the past and with my mother, who I hadn't ever made peace with before, and I was able to do that.
Do you think everyone's journey in life where you have to go through that cycle? Parents or dead husband or whatever it is?
I do feel that memoir is a great medium for exploring that very human, very complex and painful and universal experience of loss. That was one of my goals in writing the book, was to really take that on.
Was your book, Amy, also a way to investigate your past and where you are in your life now?
I'm sad in some ways that I was never able to make it as an actress.
Why sadness? Because you published 5 books now, 5 novels, and
because there was a time when I really wanted it, and in some ways, I'm glad that it didn't work out, because writing is so much more fulfilling.
Do you feel like there's also social pressure to be in the limelight?
Well, I was very lucky because I started acting around 12. I was exposed to so many creative people at a young age. So in a way, it was an unconventional childhood. I mean, I never toured the world with plays, but just, my father taking me to auditions on the subways and doing my homework while people were rehearsing a play in front. I'm sitting in the back, doing my calculus. It was a very rich New York City childhood. It did help me become a writer because I saw that the creative life was possible. And my parents are not in creative fields. So you really need those role models to see that it could be done.
In your
And
community.
So, and these were people who were committed to acting. I also had a lot of unusual experiences because I was a kid around adults. And so I got to see, they almost think that you can't hear and that you don't have eyes. And so I'd be privy to these, people having affairs with each other and various conversations that I'm sure I was soaking it all up for future writing. I think in terms of the book's connection to my life, I'm happily married, but also very intrigued by marriage as a rich font of material. And I had written a couple novels about these sort of Brooklyn bourgeois marriages, most of them terribly dysfunctional, and then I wanted to take the dysfunction to another location, to another one, and a much more high, the stakes are much higher because in Hollywood, marriage is part of your branding, and so is divorce, and so is singlehood. I mean, it's all about reinvention, and I'm interested too in the ways that we project various ideas about womanhood onto these various stars. This particular actress is heartbroken by her breakup. Well, maybe she broke up with him. Maybe she's happy. And then, whereas the guy, after the breakup is having the time of his life, playing the field, and these narratives of the kind of the character who's a spinster or a character who's a home wrecker. It's all totally, not totally invented. I'm sure some of it has a grain of truth, but it says much more about our own society's cultural norms about femininity than it does about what may or may not be going on in any of these private bedrooms.
Stacey, you teach at Columbia, right? Do you find your students being different generation, different way of being than your generation?
I teach both undergrads and graduates, but definitely...
Is it creative writing?
I teach creative writing, and definitely, I apologize for saying this, but the younger the students are, actually, the more tense they are. They're a much more uptight generation. They're an anxious bunch, and I sometimes feel like, in relation to them, like some old hippie or something, who's kind of like, kids, relax.
Well, we have wine here, so you have to.
They're worried, and I think they have reason to be worried, right? They have a reason to be worried.
But how does that transpire on the writing? Is it the choice of stories, the style of stories?
They really pay attention, which is both the good news and maybe not so much the good news for them as creative people. They really listen to what other people have to say. Some of them actually are very willing to show everything that they write and do to their parents, which we would never have done. I mean, probably until I was 40, my goal in life was to write things that would upset my mother.
We won't talk about your mother.
Right.
Next book.
They show everything they do to their parents weigh in on it. Some of them are writing about their parents, but in very loving ways. And it really feels like honestly, it feels like a different world.
I always felt like when you were young before, in the 80s or 70s, the spirit was rebellious. Now it's completely compliant.
Compliant, and also they're very responsive. As I said, for me as a teacher, it's great. But also, I teach in New York, and in New York, all of my students have a much greater sense of what the publishing industry is, what the sort of going literary culture is. They're very, very aware of what's going on in the literary world. And again, that's both blessing and curse, right? When you're young and starting out and trying to figure yourself out.
They're smarter.
Yeah.
You work with young people as well, and you have 2 daughters. One is. Do you find a generation gap to say in the way that they are?
My older daughter is 24. We went to the same college. We both graduated from Princeton, and when I got out of Princeton, I entered that crazy experimental theater world of New York City and got a super cheap apartment and could kind of, live a bohemian life without being terribly responsible or thinking about things like getting health insurance. My older daughter is so focused and responsible, and she wants to write for television. She moved to LA. She knows exactly the right steps. She's very focused, which boggles the mind. I teach at the New School of Writing, which is part of the School of Undergraduate Studies. It's a very different kind of group. School of Undergraduate Studies caters to the adult undergraduate student. My courses are phenomenally diverse in age, race, socioeconomic level, and they've come to their undergraduate studies with a huge dedication. It's their choice. It's not the obvious thing that mom and dad said to do after high school. They've made a choice. They've lived. They have stories to write. So I find them endlessly fascinating.
Amy, your daughter and yourself,
I know, I'm listening to
your
you talk about
mothers.
this, and I have a 9-year-old,
I know,
and who knows, that's probably a different generation than your 20-something.
Yeah, no, it'll be a different generation again.
Yeah.
And my 14-year-old is feels like a different generation from my 24-year-old.
Yeah,
She read your book.
The technology.
You know, it's funny, something I've been thinking about a lot, because she's at an age now where she's,
Curious.
she can open the books and read them, and a lot of them have tons of sex. And so I guess this will be her burden. This will be her thing to figure. Maybe she'll become a writer, in response to all of this, to figure it out. I would not be insulted if she never read any of my books.
Your Maddie, your girl,
Yes.
she feels like she's a bit, maybe it's appropriate for age, but she does a lot of floundering. She's more reactive to what's happening to her. You feel like there's a business does that to you. You can't really, even if you have a drive, you have to bounce around.
Yeah, well, one of the characters in the book is an older female manager in her 60s, and that was something I was interested in too, was the idea of a woman who had kind of come up in Hollywood when there weren't a lot of female role models, and how that might shape her moral code. And what is interesting though is that, to the extent that we have a handful of actresses with real power, some of them are self-initiating, which might kind of be what you were talking about some of your students not sitting on their hands and sort of, having a 20 or 30 year, fallow period where you're just sort of, you're aging and you're waiting to be cast and it's getting harder. I think that they're initiating projects,
I think for an actress it's very hard, or for actors in general, because as you grow up, you spend life trying to find yourself by playing other people's part all the time. So it's like that dichotomy all the time, and she feels very much that way. She can't find herself until really bad things happen.
And like many women, she's sort of looking to find herself in a man, which is an understandable thing if you're in a relationship with someone who's older with a lot more money and power. There's this feeling of like, oh my God, he chose me, and that's all that matters. The moment that everyone has in any relationship when you say, God, you really seem like a stranger to me, and you can have this in extremely everyday relationships. When someone it can be in good ways too. It's not only in bad, when someone surprises you or you find a new layer to your relationship. But for her, it's more of the dread, of has this person that I entrusted, has he ever really loved me, or is he just, using me?
Your character has to make tough choices. Tough choice. Do you think there's always a death involved in choices?
No, I think that's true. I mean, she has to make a couple different choices. I mean, one thing that's interesting about any performer who comes back, right, anyone who's been off the scene, right, is that you can't come back as the kind of wax version of what you were before, the wax museum version of what you were before. You need to change. It's very painful when we see people who are sort of inextricably wedded to some younger self. And so she has to choose what she's going to be next. And she also has to choose if she's going to sort of continue along the musical path that she's re-embarked on, or if she's going to fall back into a bread and butter job that she's had for a while. And that's a big choice. She's 45 in the book. And for any musician of any gender, it just gets harder as you get older. That life is not, I mean, the writing life is tough, but the acting life, the music life, it's brutal. It's brutal for everyone. When you look at, say, Marianne Faithfull, right, who has changed dramatically, not only in the way she looks or presents herself, but in her music. Her
Yeah.
musical choices have changed, have grown enormously,
Sure.
and she's riveting. She's absolutely.
She was very ill as well.
And she's absolutely fascinating, and to sort of go with her on that is just wonderful. We don't need the Marianne Faithfull of at 24 was spectacular,
A great
but
voice,
so
yeah.
is the Marianne Faithfull at 66. or however old
Yes,
she is.
different person, but still as
Oh my
good,
God,
a great
yeah.
soul.
Yeah.
Amy Sohn, the actress, not the actor, but the actress. Paperback is coming out when?
June.
June. Okay, we have a way to go. Wonderland, Stacey D'Erasmo. Paperback should be coming out
Spring
in
15.
spring as well, yes. And your book is coming out soon, and I'm talking to Eve Cohen, and the year my mother came back and
It'll be out in
was let
March.
go.
Yes.
Thank you very much for being on Boost du Jour, and
Thank
wish
you.
you all the
Pleasure.
best. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.